Welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast in partnership with NUE, that's NUE, where we explore real tools and stories for building mental strength in the modern world.
All right, it's morning. You wake up and your phone didn't charge. It's at 20%. You're conserving. You put your phone on low power mode. You dim the screen, with a low battery. Every notification, email, phone call feels urgent, right? You're a little more on edge. Other mornings, your phone is fully charged at 100%. Same notifications on your phone, same emails, same phone calls, a completely different experience. Now think about a cup. If it's a small cup, one extra pour and it spills over. If the cup is larger, it holds the exact same amount of water without a problem. The water didn't change, the container did. Or think about a backpack. At the start of a hike, you have a backpack on with a few pounds. It feels fine, right? Add a little more weight, then a little more. Eventually your shoulders ache. Small little rocks and boulders on the trail, might feel huge. The trail didn't get harder. You're just carrying more than you can comfortably hold. Or think about a Wi-Fi signal, right? When that signal's strong, everything loads smoothly. When it's weak, even a simple request, downloading something or streaming something feels frustrating. Again, same request, different bandwidth. So what do all these have in common? They're not about what's happening externally. They're all analogies about what you can handle internally, and that's capacity. And today we're unpacking why capacity is a foundational concept in mental fitness.
So what do we mean by capacity? We're not talking about productivity or about toughness. We're not talking about suppressing emotion or pushing things aside. Capacity is your ability to stay regulated under pressure, to carry responsibility without collapsing, to absorb stress without spilling it into other people in your life unhealthily, and to recover quickly when something knocks you off balance. It's your internal bandwidth. It's the size of your container. It's how much life you can hold without breaking. Most people try to change their external circumstances. Mental fitness can increase your capacity by building internal state. Stress is not the enemy. Insufficient capacity is.
Yeah, I love that definition. You can almost boil down, if you boil down mental fitness to one word, I think capacity is a great way. So that's a great definition. But I think a lot of times in life, with stress and such, we misdiagnose the problem, right? Most people think the problem is just having too much on their plate, right? A stressful job, dealing with difficult people, not enough time. But what if, like those analogies, the load isn't abnormal? What if your container is just too small, right? Think of...
And sometimes those things can be a problem. Sometimes you have to change a job or remove people from your life. But I think like what you're saying is that people too often say that's the problem when it's really an internal capacity issue.
And then there's, you see this a lot, and I think you have some examples of this, Dave, but you think of vacations, right? Vacations restore temporarily. But if your capacity hasn't changed, you get back from that vacation or your little mental break and you're back to work 48 hours later, you're already spilling over again, right? You're nearing burnout again. But when you think of capacity, that can be expanded more permanently through consistency, right? Through mental fitness.
Yeah, I just want to pause and highlight how important that is. So many times if people are living beyond their capacity, they're constantly stressed, they're on that verge of burnout, like you just said it perfectly, Luke, that vacation temporarily restores, but the underlying problem is still there. And then I think people almost dread coming back from vacation, or they dread that Sunday night, like, oh, great, I got to start work again tomorrow. That's a sign that there's a problem. So the vacations are important. It's an important part of life. It's important to spend time with family, and it's an important part of taking a break and resetting. But it's usually not the fix to burnout is just a vacation.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a real world example I thought of here. We've actually mentioned Michael Phelps a few times on different episodes, just because he's been very vulnerable about his personal story and such, right? But You look at Michael Phelps, and this is a good example of it's not what's on the plate, it's the capacity, right? Because, you look at his story, he basically won everything, all these medals, beat all these records, right? But then he still hit a dark mental health period, right? He's very open about that, and he sought help. So the point is, changing circumstances, these external things, winning, fame, gold medals and such, that doesn't guarantee inner bandwidth or capacity, right? So you can have it all and still not have capacity.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot to learn from him. Low capacity, it doesn't always look dramatic at first. It might look like irritability over small things. Here's some symptoms of low capacity: avoiding hard conversations at work or home, procrastinating simple tasks, feeling constantly behind, emotional numbness, overreacting to minor stress. So capacity depletion shows up before burnout. Burnout is what happens when you ignore the warning signs.
On the symptoms piece, Dave, I'm curious, and then I'm thinking about this myself. Like, for you personally, what are the signs when you realize your capacity is low? Like, what are the tell signs for you? Because it's individualized, right? Like, we all have different tells.
I think it's procrastination. When I'm feeling low capacity, then I just start procrastinating those important things, and it's really because I don't have the energy to do the things that I'm supposed to do. And so sometimes I distract myself with other things. The thing I know I need to do, I'm not doing, and I'm distracting myself by doing a bunch of other things. That's usually a sign of maybe there's some capacity issue, and I need to start thinking about that.
I was going to say the same one, procrastination for me, which leads to feeling constantly behind, right? It could be a simple email. You already know what you need to respond to the email, but you're just like staring at it, and then you don't respond to it, right?
A common one with people is overreacting to minor stress. I think it's being irritable over small things or overreacting. That one's not really been for me. I think that even when I'm low capacity under immense amount of stress, I can be jovial and things. I just start avoiding the things that I know I need to do.
So let's talk about load versus capacity, right? Like, what's on your plate versus capacity, and the equation there, right? Because if load exceeds capacity, that's when the stress and everything in life starts to spill over the container, right? If load equals capacity, you survive, but you feel tight. You don't have much room for other things in your life to happen before it spills over. If capacity exceeds load, that's the equation, right? Where you feel stable, you're running on all cylinders, you're creative, you're resilient, right? So the goal is not zero load. That's never going to happen in life. Stress is continuous in all different chapters of your life. So the goal isn't zero load. The goal is surplus capacity.
Yeah, and I think in our society where we're so focused on productivity, we think, and we don't want to confuse productivity and capacity. They are not the same thing. We're so focused on productivity, we think we have to do more and more and more. And if we have spare capacity, then we must not be doing a good job. We need to fill our plate until we're either full or even spilling over a little bit. And it's interesting because even if productivity is the ultimate goal, and there's nothing wrong with productivity, it's a value that we should all strive for. It's sometimes overemphasized. If productivity is the goal, by doing less, we are actually more productive. Because what happens, the converse is, when it spills over, we're needing to take times off. We're needing to take these vacations. We're constantly super stressed out. We might have, lead to burnout, which might require extended time away. And so we think that we're running at 100 miles an hour and we keep having to take these big breaks, that we're being productive. But honestly, slow productivity, it's a very interesting book, but slow productivity, where we might be doing a little bit less, but we're showing up consistently every day and getting the core important things done, that's actually more productive over time. So I don't want to get too much into productivity, but even if you really want to be a highly productive person, doing less and making sure you have spare capacity will make you more productive because it's sustainable. You're running a marathon, not a sprint. I think a really interesting example in the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which due to the pandemic was held in 2021, gymnast Simone Biles, who was the best in the world at the time, and there was this expectation to repeat gold medal, she still stepped back and withdrew from most events because her nervous system wasn't safe to push. The important point is capacity is about regulation and safety, not willpower. So after withdrawing from the team final and several individual events, she still returned in that same Olympics to win a bronze medal on the balance beam. But the important point, sometimes the strongest move isn't pushing harder, it's respecting your capacity and stepping back when you need to.
That's an interesting story. You wonder if she did push through and competed in all those, if she would have been just overloaded and not won the bronze, right?
Well, what's interesting, there's actually a thing I was reading about it called the twisties, which is a mental block where you lose your space in the air. It happened after one of the events where she was off balance in air and almost fell over when she landed. And that's when she realized she needed to pull back. But that was driven by a stress and a pressure. She was just really worried about what everyone was going to be thinking about or what people were saying on social media. And she just realized it was actually not safe physically or emotionally for her to continue to push. So she did the right thing and she was still able to medal in that Olympics, but she was out of capacity. So what builds capacity? And that's, again, what we really want to try to do is talk about some of the practical things that we can do. Connection to self increases emotional bandwidth. Connection to others increases resilience through co-regulation. Sleep increases what you can handle. Exercise increases stress tolerance. Whereas chronic exhaustion, that shrinks your container. So interesting is sleep doesn't remove stress. Rather, it increases your ability to handle stress. Or exercise. We often talk about how you release stress through exercise, but your work or family stress is still there. The circumstances that are causing the stress don't go away because you exercised. What happens is when you exercise, you clear your mind and you increase your ability to cope with that stress. And a line that you said at the very beginning, or we said at the beginning, stress isn't the enemy. Stress is an important part of life. It's a necessary part of life, and it's not going to go away in your life. But we need to be able to increase our capacity.
Yeah, no, you could listen to any episode, focus on any pillar of mental fitness, right? Like you said, connection to self, connection to others, health and vitality. They all can expand your capacity. So I think sleep is the easiest to see like the immediate feedback on, I guess, right? Like we've all seen when you get a poor night's sleep, your capacity is just completely diminished, right? On the flip side, you get great sleep and you can conquer the world.
A very capable person can be temporarily incapacitated with a really bad night's sleep.
So this next part, I want to talk about capacity versus performance, because I think this is very interesting for anyone that has, a lot of drive, right? A high performance individual, a lot of willpower. And this is where this gets interesting, right? Because if you're a high performance individual with low capacity, that's going to result in burnout. That's just the equation, right? Now, if you have a low motor, if you're low performance with high capacity, that equals, stability, but it's really just comfort, right? It's stagnation. There's no progression there. And then if you're high performance with high capacity, that's where you want to be, right? You want to have that high container, expanded capacity. And if you're a high performance individual, willpower, drive, that equals sustainable growth, right? So performance or willpower drive alone that outpaces capacity, that's kind of the danger zone. And I think that's something important to realize for high performers or people that just have this high drive, right? But if you're not focused on capacity, that's dangerous and could lead to burnout.
I wasn't even going to talk about this example, but just the way you worded that, really, I think a really good example is LeBron James. One thing that's very remarkable about him is the duration of his career. You know, he's a high scorer, but the reason he's broken the record is the most points ever by an NBA player, passing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is because of the length of his career. He's been able to play at a high level year in and year out. Now, he gets criticized for this, and I'm not going to opine on whether this is good or bad for basketball, but he prioritizes rest, sleep, and recovery, and to the point that he sometimes takes games off. And so there's some people that criticize that because, back in the 90s, Michael Jordan or other tough players, they never took that kind of time off. But the results speak for themselves. He's the highest scoring NBA player of all time. He's been able to do more over so many more years than almost any other athlete and avoid injury. He has not been plagued by injury. And part of the reason is because when his body is sore and tired and worn out, he prioritizes recovery. And so he's been able to output more on the court than almost anyone in the history of basketball. Elite performance is built on elite recovery.
That's actually a great example in the context of mental fitness and capacity.
Yeah, and so people that are young professionals or any professional that's just going at 1,000 miles an hour with low capacity, like you said, that's what leads to burnout. You're going to be able to accomplish more in your career if you're working with spare capacity. So let's do a live capacity audit. Right now, rate your capacity from 1 to 10, 10 being really high capacity, 1 being really low. What's draining you? What's restoring you? Where in your life are you overextending in your commitments or in your time allotment? And what's one change that would increase your capacity? Think about that for a minute. What's draining you? What's restoring you? Where are you overextended? And sometimes that means pulling back, understanding we're out of capacity, and so we're going to pull back. And sometimes it's working internally to increase our capacity.
And if on the question of what's restoring you, if you're struggling to find something, I think that's okay, right? Like, you may be in a place in your life where there's not much restoring you. But that last question, what's one change you could do to increase capacity, whether that's better sleep, whether that's, more awareness and connection to self, right? Just if you don't have anything on that list of what's restoring you, what's one change, right?
And sometimes it is a big move, like a Simone Biles pulling back in the Olympics. I mean, that's what a gymnast lives for. But she did the right thing in that moment and was still able to walk away with a medal, right? And career-ending injury could have resulted from her continuing to push. All right, this show is all about mental fitness, and here's something most of us don't admit. Everyone has those moments when you feel overwhelmed, stuck, or unsure, and what's actually going on in your head. That's why we built New. New is a mental fitness platform designed to help you clear your thoughts, reflect, notice patterns, develop habits, and get support that fits who you are. It remembers your goals, your wins, the things you're working on, and helps you stay on track. Not therapy, not toxic positivity, just real support when you need it. If you want to be part of the early access group, head to talkwithnew.com. That's talkwithnue.com. Sign up now and get 3 months free.
On that note of capacity, and it's something I was thinking about a little more deeply in preparation for this episode is just to clarify, capacity it's not just one thing or kind of one dimensional, right? There's at least two layers of capacity: acute capacity and structural capacity. And I'll explain this quickly. So acute capacity meaning short term. Think of it short term, right? This is your daily state-based capacity. It fluctuates. It increases when you get a good night of sleep. You, like you said, Dave, you work out, you do breath work, you take a day off, right? You have a meaningful conversation. These things matter, but cold plunge, right? Yeah. These biohacks, for instance, right? They matter, but acute capacity, that's really talking about refilling your battery, right? Not the container itself, but they don't permanently enlarge the container. They just think recharge.
And a vacation can do that. A vacation can give you short-term restored capacity.
No, exactly. The vacation will recharge you, right? Whereas on the longer term is structural capacity, right? So you have acute capacity short term, structural capacity long term. This is deeper. This is what changes your baseline, So structural capacity increases when you set and maintain different boundaries, like long term, and stick to those, right? Practice emotional regulation in mild stress. You're staying in hard conversations instead of avoiding them or sweeping them under the rug, right? You're strengthening human relationships in your life, right? So, or protecting your sleep, and your sleep is just a prerequisite, and that's a big thing for you.
There can be restorative sleep in the short term, but what you're talking about here in long term is building a consistent habit of regular sleep. And sometimes I think people who appreciate the importance of sleep but are chronic sleep deprivers, they burn it on both ends during the week, and then they have restorative sleep on the weekend and catch up. And that's not sustainable long term. Yeah,
that's still almost like in the recharge lane, right?
Yeah, that's
just like a longer recharge.
But it's almost over time reducing your container size or your capacity.
True.
But it's definitely not growing it. It's just recharging your battery. I think that's a good analogy. You have your container, your capacity, the battery size, and some of those short-term things, they recharge your battery, but these long-term things actually grow your overall capacity.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. Acute capacity is short-term, recharging your battery. Structural capacity is you're upgrading to a bigger battery, right? And that takes repetition, right? You're upgrading the container.
So I love that. Acute practices help immediately, and those are important, right? When you're on the edge and when you're burnt out, you need to take some time. You might need to do some emotional regulation, some breath work, get a good night's rest. Maybe take a short vacation. Those are all very, very important. But structural capacity, and it builds over time, and that's almost why it's harder to do. Right? It's easy to do, but it's easy not to do. And it's harder to do because we don't see any immediate results. By just sleeping that extra half hour to an hour every day, once that doesn't necessarily feel that much better than after we've done some restorative sleep on the weekend or something. But over time, when we're doing those things, sleeping well and eating and exercising and staying emotionally regulated and not avoiding hard conversations or those types of things, but like continuing to do those things day in and day out, it's very gradual, but our structural capacity builds. So the way this shows up is you still can get stressed, but you recover faster from stressful situations. You might still get triggered by something that happens at work or even something at home, but you don't spiral, right? You might get upset, but you don't spiral, or you can hold discomfort a little longer. You're making progress when it takes more to knock you off balance, right? And all of us are going to have things in life that are going to get us upset and dysregulated at times, but we can see our capacity growing when things that used to just set us off and put us in a spiral, they just might upset us for a time, and we can recover faster. So capacity growth is more like strength training than flipping a switch. You don't just grow once, you grow through repetitions over time. Mental fitness is built daily, not dramatically.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think you said something important earlier, like there's times when you truly do need to change your circumstances and take things off your plate, right? But the point of talking about capacity here is just to reframe things a bit, not only focus on that. You may not need a different life or circumstances, right? But you probably need to upgrade your battery, get a stronger engine, a bigger container, more bandwidth, right? So mental fitness is not about eliminating hard things. It's about becoming the kind of person who can handle them, right? And capacity is the point of that.
Right. So let's just go back to when we were doing that exercise. The key thing is finding one thing to apply for long-term capacity building. So if you're out of sorts right now, okay, let's look at those battery recharge things, get some restorative sleep and do those sorts of things. But what's one habit that you can commit to consistently day in and day out that will grow your capacity? Identify that one thing, commit to it, and watch your capacity grow.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mental Fitness Podcast. If you appreciated this, comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Give us a comment about what you like. Share it with some friends. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us reach others. And we appreciate you listening today.